Hey everyone, this video is a little bit different from, well, generally the retro gaming videos I do. I did do a 2-hour dive onto On and Off Lore, which is a K-pop video, but other than that, I really haven't done any video essays. But there was this one particular topic I wanted to go into. Now, this video is about ghost hunting and ghost hunters, and I want to make it clear that I am a skeptic and an atheist.
Oh my God. It just goes, there's no heaven.
But I love watching paranormal shows because they tap into a mindset that I normally don't have access to. As far as ghost hunting shows go, there are good shows. And by good, I mean they're fun to watch, not that they actually provide any evidence, which is impossible. And then there are bad shows. And then there are shows in between. My top contender for shows that occupy this middle space are both by Nick Groff, Paranormal Lockdown and Deathwalker. Nick Groff is a mild man with an unaffected delivery, and he's really another ghost hunting show himbo. Nick also loves to take his shirt off.
Oh my God. It's weird.
I think he was, if I remember correctly, he was born in California, but he was raised on the East Coast. So he really has this perfect mixture of low energy Californian vibe plus like East Coast bro. And I mean that in the nicest way possible. So Nick Groff really got his start on ghost hunting shows in Ghost Adventures, which if you're watching this video, I'm confident that you're familiar with Ghost Adventures. It's the ghost yelling show, although there's a new contender for ghost yelling videos. I'll put a clip up here.
Bismillah! 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 Bismillah!
Allahu la ilaha illa.
But Ghost Adventures is the original toxic masculinity ghost yeller show. Zach Baggins would bully his way into any room or situation and just start yelling and trying to incite fights with ghosts, and it was everything about I hate all of that. Like any ghost hunting show enthusiast, I got my start watching the aptly named and now almost ancient seeming Ghost Hunters, a show where nothing happens. A show where they do actually yell at the dark sometimes and try to start fights with ghosts. But the show is pretty boring, yet at the time it was doing its own thing, and it really captured the minds of people. From there, I watched all of the cheesiest ghost hunting shows. And when I ran out of fun stuff to watch, I watched Jack Osborne shows. And none of these shows I would describe as engaging in the level of toxic masculinity that Ghost Adventures had. An energy that Nick completely lacks. Eventually, Nick left Ghost Adventures, and I don't blame him because dealing with Zach Baggins seems like a nightmare. And from there, he started a show called Paranormal Lockdown. Now, in Paranormal Lockdown, he's grouped up with Katrina Weedman. I've never actually heard her say her last name. And Katrina was also an old aunt. She's not dead. She's still here. Katrina, if you're with us, can you give us a sign? She's an old hat too, right? I think people's first and biggest introduction to Katrina was probably Paranormal State, a show I didn't watch, so I'm not familiar with it. But the premise of Paranormal Lockdown is that Nick and Katrina stay in a location for 72 hours, 3 days, right? And the idea is that if they live for 3 days in this area, they will encounter more paranormal phenomena than someone who's just there overnight, like ghost hunters, right? I don't want to go any further without recognizing that Paranormal Lockdown has the best intro theme and sequence of any ghost hunting show ever. It was actually done by their cameraman slash producer, Rob Safi. And Rob is basically in every episode of Paranormal Lockdown. So he's almost like the third ghost hunter. Stuff happens to him and he draws that attention of phenomena to Katrina and Nick. One of the things I love about Paranormal Lockdown is this chemistry that Nick, Katrina, and Rob all have together. They're really good at yes-anding each other.
You hear that?
No.
And they're just sort of disconnected enough that you're not sure whether or not they believe in ghosts. But what they are really good at is talking to each other, laughing, having fun. And when one person sees something, the other one ups it, but without going overboard. And I think that might be the energy that Nick wanted to harness, except Nick's delivery is so mild that it's hard to believe that he could get worked up about anything. Even though Paranormal Lockdown is largely unexciting, the chemistry among them is pleasant to watch. They have nice banter, the chat is soft and sometimes emotional. Unlike Ghost Adventures, there's a complete lack of toxic masculinity. Nick treats Katrina like an equal. Katrina talks with a lot of consent language to Nick, and I get the feeling that they are just both really good people. And if they're not, they make me believe that. Plus, they always have these ridiculous devices that are of questionable origin, right? They're called the Geo box or the Geoport. And it certainly is something either like a radio or a obelisk that just has a preset dictionary of words that it's cycling through, overlaid with a bunch of feedback and ridiculous effects to make it sound ghostly. It makes it sound like they're speaking through some ethereal membrane that connects, reality and the other side. Eventually, Paranormal Lockdown was canceled. I think they had 3 seasons plus 1 in the UK. So 4 seasons together. But they're packaged differently. So if you go look for Paranormal Lockdown on any service, you'd look for Paranormal Lockdown and then also look for Paranormal Lockdown UK because they're separate shows. And after I ran out of Paranormal Lockdown to watch, I got sad and I tried to watch Portals to Hell, which is Katrina and Jack Osborne using devices very similar to the Geobox and Geoport. And the show sucks. And it's not because of Katrina. It's because Jack Osborne lacks screen, in my opinion, lacks charisma on screen. And it's a little bit hypocritical to say that Jack lacks on-screen charisma when Nick has the flattest charisma I've ever seen in a ghost hunting show. So sorry, Jack. Portals to Hell, I think only had 1 or 2 seasons. I didn't watch more than a few episodes. So if I'm missing out, let me know. Let me know what episodes I should watch. Maybe I just caught some bad ones, some dull ones. Meanwhile, Nick Groff, after Paranormal Lockdown was finished, started Deathwalker. And Deathwalker was his own show. And the first season is just Nick and a bunch of guests. So in Paranormal Lockdown, you'd have Nick, Katrina, Rob, and sometimes a guest that might be the owner of the property or the guys who made the Geoport, something like that. But in Deathwalker, it is just Nick and the guest who's like a psychic or has some connection to the case or is generally connected to the paranormal somehow. So an expert friend that Nick has join him. And if Nick's delivery in Paranormal Lockdown is like ASMR, then he's basically doing hypnosis in Deathwalker. But what he's missing in energy in Deathwalker, he makes up for in ideas with a capital I. There's an extended scene of Nick and one of his guests standing in a dark basement, knocking on pipes and waiting for the old infrastructure to rattle back at them, as pipes do, and it goes on for so long it's practically zen. I've put a link in the description that explains at least 11 non-ghost reasons why your pipes knock. There's a lot of them, and it has nothing to do with dead people. But the first season of Deathwalker isn't really about dead people. No, no, no. The first season of Deathwalker is a trip. There is stuff in here from these episodes that is out there.
There's a new controversial theory that suggests the past, present, and future exist simultaneously. If evidence could be documented to support that theory, it would change the way we perceive ghosts. I will attempt to communicate with the people who lived and died in these confined spaces. Is time even relevant? Are these spirits trapped in the past? Why are they compelled to remain tethered to these locations where they were so harshly treated during their lives?
Nick says a lot of great stuff. Honestly, it feels like Nick saw Interstellar for the first time and decided he wanted to make a whole season of ghost hunting shows about block time. So in Deathwalker, Nick talks about how the phenomena that people encounter may not necessarily be ghosts or spirits from the dead, but rather echoes from different portions of time, past, present, and future. So Nick exists in the present, and perhaps what he's hearing is actually spillover from the past or the future. And the idea, right, is that every moment of time happens simultaneously. And what he's talking about here is block time. And block time, think of block as a three-dimensional cube, right? All of time exists in one unit, in one block. It's always happening. Block time is essentially the result of Einstein lumping time into space, making space-time, right? The fourth dimension. In the physical space, right, you start with a point. And we have a dimension made of length, which is a line connecting one point to another. Then we have the second dimension, which is a plane, and that's a surface expanding the line we drew into a pane, right? So now we have what is a surface. I'll just keep doing this. And then finally, there's depth, which is the measurement of front to back. So we made a line, then we made a plane, and now we're going to move that plane out. So now we've got our cube, right? Finally, you take those three dimensions, x, y, z, and you add t for time. Block time is deterministic, meaning that everything is going to happen one particular way. No matter what choice you think you could have made, you would have always made that choice. The tree would have always fallen in that direction. The fish would have always jumped out of the pond at that time and made that many ripples. And that makes sense, right? Because if time is overlapping, it's happening all at once, then it can't possibly change. Not in that version of reality, at least. And I'm not going to get into that. So, in Nick's idea, and he wasn't alone, there were a lot of books and very popular ideas about block time at this particular moment from the mid 2010s to like 2020. If that's the case, then ghosts are just us observing past or future events somehow and not dead people. That's the premise of the first season of Deathwalker. One guy also tries to invoke string theory, and they talk about how ghosts are dispersed energy from vibrating strings. And let me tell you, I'm not going to entertain anything any of these guys have to say about string theory, because string theory is so confusing and it's fallen out of favor. You know what? I don't need string theory to understand or cope with the idea of what happens to my energy after I die or as I live this life. I'm particularly fine with the law of conservation, right? That you're made up from things like dinosaurs, and Jimmy Hoffa didn't ever really disappear. He just became a part of you. And someday, something somewhere, which could be cool and bewildering, will be made up of particles that for but a brief moment were contained within a lump of a mess that you define as yourself. To me, that's as close to spirituality as I'll ever have. Quantum mechanics can be a bit like a religion, if religions were made of testable hypotheses. Anyway, the fun thing about Deathwalker, and the reason why you should watch the first season, is because it's essentially just Nick wandering around in dark rooms and philosophizing on very complex ideas about quantum mechanics. Also, shirtless Nick is back.
Good morning. I need to find out what happens when you die.